By the middle of August, the tomato plants in our kitchen garden are carrying more fruit than the family can eat, and every year, without fail, I hear the same thing from people who grow their own. They are beautiful, but there are too many. What do I do with all of them? And almost every year I watch people let tomatoes go past, set out bowls of them at work, or feel guilty about the ones that soften before they get to them. The tomato is the most generous fruit in the garden, and also one of the most time-limited. The window from perfectly ripe to gone is short, and the people who built this farmhouse understood that the solution to too many tomatoes in August is eating well in January. My grandmother put up tomatoes every summer of her life in this farmhouse kitchen. Not once, not when she felt like it. Every year, with intention and with method, so that the shelves in the root cellar held a year's worth of tomato flavor, and the family did not reach for a can of store-bought anything from September through the following August. I am going to show you every method she used, why each one produces a different result, and which one to use for which purpose, so that nothing you grow this season goes to waste, and the tomatoes you pick in August are still feeding your family next April. I am Levi Yoder. I was raised plain here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, where August in the garden is not a gift that simply arrives and passes through. It is a task that arrives, and whether your winter pantry is full or empty depends entirely on whether you meet that task with the right methods in the right 2 weeks. The tomatoes will not wait for a convenient time. They will not wait for a weekend when you have no other plans. They are ready when they are ready, and they are passed when they are passed. I am going to show you what those methods are and how to apply them in the days you actually have. Before I show you, let me say this plainly. If you want the full collection of the old homestead methods that were handed down in our family, from the garden and orchard to the pantry, cellar, and the everyday keeping of a house, I have gathered them into one simple ebook. You will find it in the description below. Now, let us get back to the topic. Before any method, the selection. Not every tomato goes into long-term preservation, and choosing the wrong tomatoes wastes your effort. For any preserved form, sauce, paste, canned whole, or dried, you want tomatoes at peak ripeness but not past it. A tomato that is soft, cracked, or showing any sign of mold is not a canning tomato. It is a tomato for today's lunch, and if it does not make today's lunch, it goes to the compost. The tomato you preserve carries whatever quality it has at the moment of preservation into the jar and into the cellar and into January, and a batch of canned sauce made from overripe or damaged tomatoes will taste like overripe and damaged tomatoes in January. Use the best you have. Process every day rather than letting the harvest accumulate. 2 pounds processed today is better than 10 pounds processed under pressure 3 days from now. The first method is the whole canned tomato, which my grandmother considered the most versatile preserved form because the whole tomato gives you maximum flexibility in how you use it later. A whole canned tomato can be broken down into sauce, added to a braise, or used in a soup exactly as a fresh tomato would be, because the whole form preserves the texture and the cellular structure of the fruit better than any other method. For water bath canning of whole tomatoes, use only ripe, firm, unblemished fruit. Blanch each tomato briefly in boiling water, 30 to 60 seconds, until the skin loosens. Transfer immediately to ice water and slip the skins off. The skins must come off before canning because they become tough and unpleasant in the jar over months. Pack the peeled whole tomatoes into sterilized quart jars, pressing firmly to fill the spaces and release their own liquid. Add 2 tablespoons of lemon juice per quart jar to ensure sufficient acidity for safe water bath processing. This is not optional. Modern tomato varieties have been bred for lower acidity than the tomatoes of a generation ago, and without the added acid, a water bath canned tomato is not safe for shelf storage. Process quart jars in a boiling water bath for 85 minutes. The sealed jars, properly processed, keep for a minimum of 1 year in a cool, dark place. The second method is tomato sauce, which is what most people reach for first, and which my grandmother actually used second in volume behind whole tomatoes. Sauce commits the tomatoes to a flavor profile before you know what you are making in January, which limits your options. But sauce is more efficient when you are processing large quantities quickly, because you do not need to handle individual fruits with the same care, and a good sauce base is genuinely useful through the year in a different way than whole tomatoes are. Core and quarter your tomatoes without bothering to peel them, cook them down until soft, and pass them through a food mill to remove the skins and seeds. What you have is a pure tomato puree that you then simmer down to the sauce consistency you want. My grandmother added nothing to her sauce base, no herbs, no garlic, no onion, because a plain sauce base is the most versatile form. You can turn it into anything in January. A sauce made in August with basil and garlic in it becomes a specific thing that may or may not fit what you want to cook. Process the finished sauce in sterilized jars with 2 tablespoons of lemon juice per quart jar, processed in a boiling water bath for 40 minutes for pint jars and 35 minutes for quart jars, following current recommended processing times. The third method is tomato paste, and this is the one most people do not attempt because it takes the most time but produces the most concentrated flavor and the longest shelf life. Tomato paste is nothing but tomato sauce cooked down to the point where most of the water has evaporated and what remains is intensely flavored and dense. You start with the same food mill puree, and then you cook it at low heat, stirring regularly, for several hours until it has reduced by at least half, and preferably by 2/3. The paste should stand on a spoon without spreading. My grandmother finished the reduction in a low oven on sheet pans, spreading the partially reduced paste thin on the pans and letting the oven draw off the remaining moisture over 4 to 6 hours. A tablespoon of paste made this way carries the flavor of a pound of tomatoes, and the jars are much smaller, which means they take less shelf space and process more quickly. Process tomato paste in half-pint jars with 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, 15 minutes in a boiling water bath. The fourth method is drying, and this is where I want to spend extra time because it is the most underused of the tomato preservation methods and produces something that most people who discover it find genuinely revelatory. A dried tomato, properly done, is a concentrated burst of flavor unlike anything the fresh or the canned tomato offers. The water has been removed, and the sugars and acids are intense. My grandmother dried tomatoes on wooden racks in the barn loft in the heat of August, which required no equipment beyond the racks and the reliable heat of a Lancaster County August afternoon. Slice the tomatoes in half lengthwise for smaller varieties, or into half-inch slabs for larger ones. Lay them cut side up on the drying racks, sprinkle lightly with salt, and place them in the sun or in an oven set to its lowest temperature, around 150 degrees, with the door propped slightly open to allow moisture to escape. Dry until the tomatoes are leathery and no longer sticky, which takes 6 to 8 hours in the oven or 2 to 3 days in the sun depending on the heat and humidity. Dried tomatoes can be stored in olive oil, which both preserves them and produces an infused oil with extraordinary flavor, or packed dry in sealed jars in a cool, dark place where they keep for up to a year. The fifth method is freezing, and I include it because it is the simplest and the most forgiving of your time, though it produces a different result than any of the other methods and is not a substitute for them. A frozen whole tomato, thawed and used in a cooked dish, works remarkably well. The texture changes completely on thawing, which means a frozen tomato is not useful as a fresh tomato, but in soups, sauces, and braises, the cooked texture matters less than the flavor, and the frozen tomato delivers excellent flavor with almost no processing time. Blanch, peel, core, and freeze on a sheet pan before bagging so the tomatoes do not clump. Frozen tomatoes keep for 12 months without quality loss. Each of these 5 methods produces something the others cannot. Whole canned tomatoes give you flexibility in how you use them later. Sauce gives you convenience and eliminates January prep time. Paste gives you intense concentration from a small jar. Dried tomatoes give you intensity and a form that adds flavor without adding liquid to a dish. Frozen tomatoes give you speed and ease at the real cost of texture. My grandmother used all 5 across a full summer's harvest, allocating the most perfect unblemished fruit to the whole canned method, and working down through the other methods as the quality and size of the available tomatoes varied through the season. By the end of August, the cellar was stocked and the winter was already planned. The store sells you canned tomatoes year-round. It does so because it can, because the supply chain makes it possible to offer the category year-round, at a price that makes putting your own up seem like optional effort rather than necessary work. But the tomato in the store can is not the tomato you grew or could grow. It is the tomato, a large-scale commodity operation selected and grew for maximum yield, uniform size, and mechanical processing efficiency. And the flavor gap between a jar you processed in August from fruit you picked that same morning and a can from the grocery shelf is meaningful and does not require any explanation to someone who has tasted both side by side. The work of 2 weeks in August is precisely what the difference between those two jars tastes like in January. Tell me in the comments which of these 5 methods you already use and which one you are planning to try for the first time this season. And tell me your county and your state while you are there. I read every single one. Next time I am going to show you how my grandmother selected and saved tomato seeds each year from her best performing plants, and why the tomatoes she grew at the end of her life were measurably better than the ones she started with at the beginning, because she was doing every single year what commercial seed companies do not want home gardeners to know how to do for themselves. The people who built this country with their own 2 hands knew things we are only just now starting to truly remember.